Second, I'd like to thank my position coach, Coach DeKaiser. Coach, you taught me a lot about the game, playing linebacker, but more importantly, you taught me about life and being a better man. So thank you very much. I'm going to miss working with you in the fall. I'd also like to take this time to thank Coach Bertil, not just for my 4 years, but for the 15 or 16 years he was here. He really built this program from nothing to something. I'd also like to thank Coach Hager as well. You know, the guy wrote us pretty hard and he expected a lot, but I sincerely believe that he cared about us more as students and as men rather than football players. And to me, that's a sign of a good coach. I'd also like to thank Chase Emnott, Joanne Krieger, and Ryan Vandervest, and the rest of the support staff. Thank you guys for everything you do. Your efforts definitely do not go unnoticed. I'd also like to thank Dan and Barb Heff for their efforts in the post-game meal. You guys did an outstanding job on a limited budget, so thank you guys very much for that. Again, your efforts don't go unnoticed either. I also want to take this time to recognize one player on this team, Nick Keller. For those of you that don't know, Nick is kind of doing a little different career path than all of us. Most of us are just doing the go get your degree and go work. But Nick is in the Army ROTC program. So upon graduation, he's going to be commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. So I'd just like to thank him for serving our great nation and all the sacrifices that he's going to have to make throughout his career. I'd also like to welcome Coach Oppenorth. Coach, we're behind you 100%. Best of luck next year, we'll be watching. I'd also like to thank every one of the players. I might have known you for all 4 years, or if you were a freshman, just for one. But I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And I think you guys all touched my life in some way or another, and I just hope I did the same for you. Now for the guys returning, you know, the past 4 years we've been to the playoffs 3 times. If you guys haven't noticed, our margin of defeat has gotten smaller and smaller every time. And it's only a matter of time before we flip that margin of defeat into a margin of victory. So make sure you guys keep working hard and next year be the ones to flip it to a margin of victory. Thank you.
For the sake of brevity, I'll try to skip the parts that they already said. I'm Joe Schlueter, senior safety, number 38. Before we get into everything else, we actually forgot a few awards that weren't passed out. The first is Best Blocker on Interception Returns, and that goes to Max Pierman. For some of you that don't know, and Coach G told the Shoeless Joe story from Knox, well, if you see on film, Max is actually ripping the Knox running back off of me during it. And then that helped me later get to the end zone. And then in the Ripon game, Zach Clarkowski got a pick, and Max hit the Ripon offensive lineman really hard. And it proceeded in an uproar from his high school friends who were in the stands, and it was exciting. And then that was 2 weeks in a row, and then the next week, late in the game, the Carroll quarterback kind of just dropped the ball right in front of Max, and he picked it up, and rather than run into the end zone to be rewarded for blocking for us, he kind of fell on the one and let Tringali get the QB sneak. That's one of the things about Max. He's really unselfish. Second award goes to Best Voice Impersonations, and that's Ben Rain. If you haven't heard this guy, he can entertain us for an entire practice with the Cleveland Brown, basically any cartoon character. He's pretty good at it. But thank you, Ben, for making me laugh. And then third award goes to Best Locker Room Dancer, and that's Jordan Baker. And I have to speak only for the South locker room because that's where we were. But, in November when he had the porn stash going and everything, just the whole thing fit. And, some of those laughs are the things you're going to remember 50 years from now. You're not going to remember the scores of the games you played in. You're going to remember those moments coming into the locker room every day and seeing Jordan and laughing. But I'll get into it then. I'd like to take the time to thank a bunch of special people who helped us this season. And it's already been said, but I gotta say it again. Thank you, Coach Joanne Krieger and her support staff, and Sean Nettesheim. And I gotta thank Ryan Vanderbest, who's, if you have worked with them, probably wasn't a great thing because so-and-so was hurt. But if you haven't worked with them, which is also kind of a good thing because so-and-so wasn't hurt, he's tremendous to work with and he does his job really well, and all of his student workers are fabulous. I gotta thank the coaches. Coach D, can't punt, can't win. Yep. Their mentoring and guidance is priceless, and it's one of the main reasons this program is as good as it is, year in and year out. I personally would like to thank my position coach, Coach Blomsky. He's done so many things for me on and off the field that there's no way I'll be able to repay him ever. The senior defensive players would also like to pass on a special thank you to Coach Hager, our defensive coordinator, for allowing us to be the first senior class in like 6 years to have the same defensive coordinator 2 years in a row. And I think our play on the field showed how valuable he was to this team. I'd like to thank the players. I'd like to thank this crazy group of guys who spent way too much time together this past season. But if there's one thing to say about this group, is that we stuck together despite the wave after wave of adversity we had to face. And that includes 3 come-from-behind wins, multiple injuries, -7-degree weather against the #1 team in the nation, and so on and so forth. Not to mention the Carroll Week. That week, most of you might not know, but that week was the most trying and stressful week I've had in my 4 years here, and I've experienced on this team. The campus got hit by a Norwalk virus, and it infected half the population. So Wednesday of Carroll Week, half the team isn't at practice. They're all puking their guts out back in the dorm rooms. And on top of it, it's the 4th week of the school year, so we've got tests and papers due. So it's just, everything's getting piled on, and half the guys are sick. I think Tony got sick the morning of the game. And we go to Carroll, who's an opponent who hasn't beaten us in 15 years, and they've never beaten Coach Bertil. We're at their place. They've got this great running back, supposedly. It's hot, and we beat them. And it was awesome. And I think that's just one of those things that it just speaks volumes about this team, because everything was lined up for us to lose that game. We won. And then the following 2 weeks, we came from behind to beat Monmouth and Cornell. I want to give a special shout out to my fellow defensive backs: South Park, Hammer, Danny, Maddie, Paulie, Frankie, Chisel, Swanee, Ho-Ho, Grandy, Foose, Dylan, Benny, Taylor, and Smokey. That's how we refer to each other. Now I'd like to address each class individually. To the freshmen, you made it through your first semester season. Now work to keep everyone together. Do your best to help each other out so that in 3 years you can all be standing up here as seniors. That's something that our class really didn't do a good job of. You guys can do a lot better than us, and I know that. To the sophomores, you're halfway done. 2 seasons, 2 rings. You got the best running back in the region and one of the best offensive line classes this program has ever seen. How are you going to finish? 4 rings in 4 years? You could rewrite the history books as one of the best classes in SNC history. To the juniors, I guess the guy who usually says this isn't here right now, so I'll be the one to say it. It's your team now. I'm sure all you can remember one upperclassman in your time here who's impacted you or influenced you in a positive way, and now you're that upperclassman, whether you like it or not. And you're going to find that it's not as much about what you say, it's your actions that are going to influence and speak louder to those younger players in the future. You guys got an All-American, and I want to point out he is on the defense. Write it. And next year, I don't want Tim Bald going to the NCAA convention and getting congratulated for giving Whitewater a good game. I want him to get congratulated for going to Salem and winning it. And I'll be sitting in my armchair drinking a beer watching you guys in the stack. And final finally to the senior class. It went by fast. We can all remember moving into Madlore for camp 3.5 years ago. We hardly knew each other, and we might have even hated each other a little. Tony, Craig. And like, we kind of still hate each other sometimes, you know, we still fight. Tony and Robert. Why is it always Tony? Tony's awesome. I don't think any of us expected to be such close friends within a week of living together, and I certainly didn't think our brotherhood would be as strong as it is now. The team is just one big family, and when this senior class splits up to graduate school or law school or ends up working for Schneider Trucking or Green Bay Public Schools or continue the journey as a football player or moves down to Chicago or Madison or even Florida or ends up working for the Army Corps of Engineers, we're all still going to be Green Knights, and we're still going to be the senior class of Team 80, so thank you, seniors. I'll try to be brief, but there's one person I did to thank, and that's Coach Jim Pertil. If there's one way to describe Coach Pertil, it's that he did everything for the sake of the team and the seniors on the team. So it's been pointed out, some of you may not know, that he didn't have a family to go home to at night. He spent late hours in Schulte's on the way back from the bar. We'd seen him during the season and the off season, because this team was his family. And we would always poke fun at him as players for being crazy or playing on the Green Knight theme a little too much. I still swear to this day that 3 years ago when he was suspended for the Beloit game, he went and tried on the suit of armor in Schulte's once or twice. Probably patrolled the grounds looking for ripping spies in the process, but it's easier to overlook the craziness when you win games. His record here, 130-30, with 11 conference championships, speaks for itself. Had Monmouth not acquired the future NFL quarterback Alex Tanney, it may have even been a more impressive record with even more championships. Every day at practice, Coach Pertil would, while we were doing stretches, would come out and he'd come walk onto the field with, always with his either vest or visor or his big raincoat with the hood up, but he always had the glasses perched on the end of his nose and a whistle around his neck, and that look on his face. It wasn't a scowl, but it was a look of intensity that which peered into our souls to ask us the question, are you ready to work today? And if you weren't ready to work, you'd be able to tell, and he'd ride your butt all practice, so the next time you came out to the field, you know that you'd be better be ready to work. And it was always the offensive line, apparently. He loved you guys. I thought he was playing favoritism for a little bit, because he spent every day with you guys. That's my spot here. Coach Pertil never spoke of it much, but his pride and joy was Schneider Stadium. I did have the opportunity to watch him show it off to another head coach from a different school in a different conference, and he got really excited when he talked about Schneider. He was the most noble Green Knight the school has ever seen, and Schneider was his castle. In fact, it might be a little too soon, but I propose that in a few years, and maybe even Coach Maz can pull some strings here, but I propose the school gets a statue of Coach Pertil in his vest and visor with a clipboard and a whistle in his mouth and eyeglasses hanging off the edge of his nose, with the look of intensity in his face, and we put it right behind the gates of Schneider, so that everybody who comes in gets to look at him and they get to see that look that says, are you ready to work? It would be a perfect tribute to the first head coach of Schneider Stadium. And one thing Coach Pertil would say at the beginning of every season is that his goal for this team is to make the St. Norbert college football experience the best experience of our lives. Well, he's not here right now, but you were successful, Coach. Thank you.
Great job. Unbelievable. And